Hey friends, it's Susanna. I am back today to share a fun video about how to use project starters. So I recently shared a project starter as a download for the Messy Media member tier, and I thought I would show you a couple ways that you can use them. I've heard from a lot of people that they want to get started in mixed media but aren't really sure where to start and are afraid that they'll mess up. So I thought this was the perfect way to help you get introduced to mixed media without having to go all in. So I went ahead and printed out the project starter that you could download in the Messy Media tier for. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I printed it out twice, once on 80-pound cardstock and once on really thin 20-pound computer paper. And I'm going to start with the thicker one, and I'm going to use that one as the base of my project. So I'm just using a bit of matte medium to adhere that to a piece of watercolor or mixed media paper so that it's a little thicker. That way when I'm working with it, it won't warp as much. It'll still warp a little, but it won't warp as much. And then I'm just going around the edges to make sure that it's really stuck on there. And I printed it out square, but you could easily print it out as the full sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper or whatever size you're printing on. It's sized large enough. I just don't work on square canvases very often and thought it would be a fun challenge. So I'm just applying that matte medium to adhere it to that thick piece of mixed media paper. And as you know, I have a hard time washing my brushes like I should, so I'm trying to get better about that. I'm not sure what I'm doing right now, but I'm sure it's something. Oh, I'm putting on Christmas music. Important things. So after this brief interruption of needing Christmas music on, we will get back to what we're doing. There we go. So now I'm drying that matte medium, making sure that that project starter is nice and adhered to that paper so that when I start adding the wet paints and sprays and such, it won't just come off. And once that's done, I start picking out the colors of paint that I want to use. Usually I would cover this in clear gesso just because I printed it on an inkjet printer and not a laser printer. So when you add certain elements on the top, water-based elements, the ink from your printer will run. And it's not too noticeable, like from where the camera is to where the piece is, you can't tell, but when I was up close working on it, it was smudging a little bit. So I would normally apply a coat of clear gesso on the top of it, but I didn't have any, so I just went ahead and went for it. And in the end, it still looks great. You can't even tell, but I just like the clear gesso to give it a little bit of extra primer so that the ink doesn't smear as much. Now I'm using more matte medium to apply a few pieces of polka dot tissue paper. And if you saw that I tore this off, this is just tissue paper that one of my kits from the Reset Girl was wrapped in. So I just keep extra pieces of tissue paper laying around for this purpose. And I'll try to share alternatives throughout this video to the products that I use, because I know if you're just getting started in mixed media, you may not have all the products that I'm using and you may not want to invest in them yet. So I'll try to share alternatives that will work just as well that a lot of people have laying around the house. So I'm just drying that matte medium, and then I will get started with the paint. So like I said, if you're just getting started with mixed media, these project starters are a great way to try out a mixed media project, but if you don't like it, you can easily just toss it, reprint it, and start all over, and you don't have to feel bad about putting in effort that you waste or anything like that. You don't have to feel bad if you ruin it. And if you're not sure where to get started, these are another great thing because the color is already put down for you. You're just adding to it. So now I'm just pulling out a few paintbrushes that I'm going to use, and I think I'm picking paint colors right now. I know what I'm doing. I'm trying to find my paint markers because my desk is a disaster and I didn't end up finding them. So that's sad, but they are on my desk somewhere and I need to clean so I can find them. I move on from that and I decide to just use gelatos, and you can do this same thing that I'm doing with these gelatos if you just have crayons. So if you have like Crayola crayons, if you use a heat tool, if you have like a heat tool or a blow dryer even, to just warm them up just a little so that they're a little more waxy, you can put them on your project like I just did with the gelato and then smudge them. And I'm just using a craft sponge, but you could use a makeup sponge as well. Or your finger, actually. Your finger will work well also. And I'm just doing that in the pattern that I like, but you obviously would do it in the pattern that you like with the colors you like. So just get creative right now. And again, I'm smudging it with that craft sponge. Just the same one, I just flipped it over, so I'm using a different side of it. Sorry I'm a little bit off camera there. And now I'm moving on to paint. I'm just using acrylic paint. These are the little paint pods from Target. And I'm already distracted, so not painting. Now I am using mists, sprays. And the two I choose are Distress Stains, Tim Holtz Distress Stains, and this one's a really pretty lavender color. And then I also use a really pretty like blush pink color. And I'm just splashing those around. I like that they're water-based so that they react differently to the products that I put on after them than a non-water-based spray would. And if you don't have mists, you can use watercolor. Watercolor paints work really well for this. Even if you're just using like one of those really small palettes from Michaels, you can get them for like $5, or you can use like a Crayola watercolor palette. Any watercolors will work. You can even, if you have a little pod or a pot of acrylic paint, you can put a tiny dab of that in like a dish and mix it with some water and splatter that. You could use marker ink. If you have markers of any kind, like Crayola markers or highlighters or anything, you can scribble the ink on a Ziploc baggie and then use a paintbrush dipped in water to make it a little bit more liquidy, and then more liquidy. I don't know if that's a word. A little bit more watery, and then just kind of fling it around, and that'll work as well for the same splattery effect. And that one that I just used now, that's a Heidi Swapp Color Shine. And then I'm drying those, and then I go for the white. Drying, drying, drying. More drying. They really didn't want to dry. I don't know what was going on. Oh, I'm not going in for the white. I am going with this dark green acrylic paint instead, and these are the little pods from pots. I want to call them pods, but they're pots of paint from Target, and I'm just doing my signature little paint lines or dashes that I do in pretty much all of my projects. And when I turned on the Christmas music, I knew I was going to eventually reach for a green, and I was so convinced that I was going to hold off and I wasn't going to use dark green. And then after I was done and I was editing this video, I realized that I did end up using the green, but I like the way it turned out, so maybe the Christmas music gave me an insight. Now I'm adding a bit of a lavender color, and I like that that helps blend the background of the project starter into the elements that I'm adding on top of it, so it kind of makes it all seem like it's one rather than a piece of paper that I added things to. And then I'm going in with this is another, I think it's acrylic paint. It's a craft paint just from Michaels or Hobby Lobby. It's a really pretty aqua color. And I'm just adding accenting dashes to those initial dark green lines. And then I'm going to go in with this gold color that I got also from Target. I'm not crazy about it. It's a really pretty color when it's in the pot, the pot. I said the right thing this time. It's a really pretty color when it's in the pot, but it doesn't show up well on projects for some reason. I don't think it's concentrated enough, the color, but I use it anyway. And of course I got distracted and I went in with the white. And I was listening to a song from Polar Express and I'm pretty sure that I was going crazy because I was thinking of snow. And so I just went all out with the white and kept going and going and going. And then I couldn't get enough white, so I started spraying it. There I go. I really like the white Heidi Swapp Color Shine. It's kind of a transparent white, so when it dries, it's not like super bright. It blends into the project well. And I was using the heat gun to kind of manipulate the puddles a little so that they weren't perfectly round. And it just turned out looking really cool. I like it a lot. So you can kind of see there in the background the liquid moving around with the heat when I do that. And then my camera died, of course. So in the time that it died, I didn't do anything except put those little gold dashes, which you can see there, next to the other clusters of dashes. So you didn't miss much. I just put those gold dashes and then realized and turned the camera back on. And now I'm going to go in. Actually, I don't know if I'm going to go in with the gold Heidi Swapp Color Shine. I know I'm shaking it, but I don't know if I'm going to use it just yet. I think I do my quote first. I did something else as well. I added a little scribbly black border around the edge of the square canvas as well with that pen that I'm using right there, which is a Faber-Castell. It is Faber-Castell, I think, yeah. Faber-Castell, and that's in an extra small, I believe. They have a small and an extra small, and I really like both of them. That one's a small. So I really like both of them for mixed media because they're India ink pens, so the ink in them is an India ink, and it writes over almost everything. So I'm just trying to get my quote on there without putting my hand in the wet paint too much because it wasn't completely dry yet. Like I said, it writes over almost everything. So I just wrote over acrylic paint, mists, I wrote over gelatos, and it wrote over everything perfectly. And that's a pretty small tip right there on that pen. So I'm always impressed when I use this pen that it writes over everything so smoothly. And I just clean off the edge so that the any acrylic paint or anything that it collected as I was writing doesn't dry on there and ruin it, so then I can use it the next time. And now I am finishing it up with some gold Heidi Swapp Color Shine. Then I'm going to dry that, and I thought about leaving it on this full sheet. It's a 9.5 by 11 sheet of white mixed media paper, just as almost like a mat to it in case I wanted to frame it or do something else with it. I don't know. But I really like the idea of it being square, especially since I don't work on square pieces very often. So I end up just cutting it into the square that it was initially. And I leave that mixed media paper as a backing on it so it is a little thicker and not as warped. I'm using these huge Ranger scissors that are They're massive. They're so big that I barely have the hand strength to cut through that paper with them. But I like them because you don't have to use as many cuts to get through large things. You can see me struggling there. And there it is, the finished product. So here's an up close look. And I really like the way it turned out. And if I didn't know that there was a project starter behind that, I wouldn't know that there was a project starter behind that. And so now I'm going to move on to the second way that you can use these pieces that you can download. And while I'm just showing you with the one that is available for download, you can easily do this same thing with like a matte piece of paper from a catalog. So say you like an image from a catalog, you can just pull that out and use that as a project starter. As long as the paper is matte, or if it is glossy, you cover it with something like clear gesso or a white gesso first. You can use almost anything as a project starter, which is really cool. And this time I'm going to use my art journal. You can tell that I didn't put a piece of wax paper between the pages of my last piece that I did, which you may have seen the video for. So it ended up getting stuck and torn a little, unfortunately, but that's okay. I'm not going to let it bother me. I just put a piece of wax paper in now, and you'll see how I do that. So you're getting a little peek into how I keep my art journal from the pages from sticking together and ripping. I don't use a fixative, so the acrylic paint or the modeling paste or whatever is on the page will stick to the other page as the book sits closed. So I just put a piece of wax paper in between the two pages when I close it, and they stay nice. And this time I will remember to put the washi tape down the center before I do the gesso, and I will remember to use a neutral colored washi tape. So I was patting myself on the back for that because I remembered both of those things this time. And I love that washi tape. It's from Felicity Jane. I don't remember which kit it's from, but it is from Felicity Jane. I don't know if it's still available, but it's a good one. So then I'm just taking off the excess that was hanging off the edge there. And then I'm going to add white gesso to the entire page. And with these mixed media journals, these art journals, it's not totally necessary to add gesso to your page before you start. I do it for a few reasons. I really like the matte surface that it gives and the nice bright white color that I can start out with, so I know that anything that I add to it will appear in the color that it's supposed to, instead of being a different color because I'm using it on an off-white paper. And then I also just like knowing that my page is really primed and ready to take those wet mediums like mists and whatever else I need to use on it. So I tend to always use gesso on my page before I get started, but with a mixed media paper, especially like this, it's probably not totally necessary. So I'm just adding a thin layer. You can see how thin it is. You can see the washi through it. So it's a really thin layer, and it's just for priming purposes. And then I'm going to dry that a little with my heat gun so that I'm ready to get started. And like I mentioned in the last video, I'm using an Illustrated Faith Bible journaling mat to protect the piece behind it that I've done so that I don't get gesso all over it. You could do the same thing with just like a hard piece of cardboard. You could do it with, I don't know, if you have acetate laying around, you could use that. You could probably even use wax paper. It wouldn't be as stiff, but you could probably get away with it. And I say probably a lot because most of these things I haven't tried myself, but I'm guessing they would work just by by knowing a little bit about mixed media. So then I'm just tearing that project starter into different shapes that I want. And since I printed this on regular computer paper, it is fairly thin. It's 20-pound computer paper, and it's just the generic Up and Up brand from Target, so it's not the greatest quality. I mean, it's decent, but it's not spectacular. So it'll work almost like the tissue paper that I put on the last piece, but since it's a little bit heavier, instead of applying it with matte medium, I'm using my Scotch Quick Dry adhesive in my fine liner bottle. And that's just so that I can ensure it'll stick down and won't peel up and ruin the piece as I'm working on it. So if you're not new to mixed media and you still want to use these project starters, you can use them in different ways. You can use them how I'm using them here, just as pieces to enhance your project with, or you could print them out and use them as patterned paper. You could use them in your paper crafting. I'm losing my voice for some reason. And my camera ran out of space there a minute ago. You probably saw it did a little cross dissolve action. I was having camera troubles, so it ran out of space, but you didn't miss anything. I caught it on time. And then I'm going over those with matte medium, and that's just to add that extra bit of stick to them, and so to help them blend into the page a little bit more. And then on top of them, or near them, or around, while I have the matte medium out, I'm just adding some more of that tissue paper, and that's just because I had it laying next to what I was working on. And when I'm working with tissue paper, if it folds and kind of bunches up, I leave it, especially like on something like this, because it just gives it more character and texture, and it doesn't need to look perfect. So like I mentioned in the last video, using a loose hand is really important when I do my mixed media, going for process and not the outcome, even though I like the outcome to look nice as well. It's totally fine if it's not perfect. And in this one, I actually did a really good job of keeping with my white space goal. So if you've been following along with my mixed media videos, I've been trying to do more white space just as a challenge for myself, because it's not something I normally gravitate toward in my mixed media, which is funny because that's exactly what I gravitate toward in my paper crafting. So I've just been trying to use a little bit more white space, and every time I try to do that, I forget and I end up covering the entire page. But this time, I stuck to it, and I have a little bit of white space here and there, and I really, really like the way it turned out. I was planning on using all sorts of things on this, like modeling paste and stamps, and I was going to go crazy, but once I got going, I actually really liked the simplistic style I was going with. So now I'm using like it's like a creamy taupe brown driftwood. I don't know what it's called. It's like a light tan. And that's from Target, and I'm just smudging it all around. And then I got bold, and I went in with a really bright color, and it spooked me, and I got scared because the bright colors are not really my thing. But in the end, it looks really cool. So this is just a really royal blue color. It's from Michaels, and the paint itself is not my favorite. It's really watery, but for this it worked because you could see the white background through it because it was so thin, and that also helped me cover it up a little when I realized just how bright it was. I had seen the blue color in the project starter, and I really liked it, and I felt like I wanted to bring that out more. So I went with this color thinking it would be lighter on the paper than it was in the bottle. And I was wrong, but it still works out well. Look at me cleaning my brush. So good. And I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm doing something. I think I'm trying to pick the colors that I want to use. I keep my mixed media supplies on a Rascog cart next to my desk, so if you see me or if you don't see me, I'm most likely off camera digging through the cart, trying to figure out what I want to use next. And now I'm drying that blue paint because I want to go in with this really pretty green color. It's called Seaweed. It's another Target paint. And this is a different green than the green I used in the last layout, which was more of like a Christmassy green, a forest green. I don't know what it's called. It might be called forest green actually, but I know that this one is called seaweed green. And it goes really well with that bright royal blue. Now I'm shaking Hattie Swap Color Shine. This is the white one again. And I am adding those white splatters. And I thought that would tone down the blue a little, and it didn't, but I still really like the way it looks. I end up going with a different technique to tone it down. Now I'm adding, this is that same blush pink color, I believe, from the last layout, or it might be the purple. It's one of the same ones from the last layout. I think it's the pink. And I just added a tiny bit of that, and then I added a yellow, and this is a Dylusions spray mist. Dylusions, I don't know what they call their mists. Everybody calls them something different, and it's so hard to remember all of the product names, but that one is from Dylusions, and it's the bright yellow one. And then I'm trying to dry those. They dry so slow, especially today for some reason. Everything was drying slow for me, so I end up smearing a lot of it, but it still looks really cool, so I am okay with it. Ooh, now I'm going in over that blue with a really light purple gelato. It's called Fig. It's one of my favorite gelato colors. And then I'm using that craft sponge. It's actually the same one I used on the last layout. I just used a different corner of it to smudge that over the bright blue to make it a little lighter. And when I was editing this video, I was like, ooh, I should have just stopped there and left that blue the way it was. But I still, in the moment, thought it was a little too bright, and I tone it down a little bit more. But before I do that, I am going to add more gelato work. So this is like a charcoal color. I'm not sure what it's called. It might be called charcoal, but it is charcoal gray that I'm about to use. And I am just going to do little scribbles of it here and there. Those are like little doodly lines. Again, I try to just turn my brain off and let my hand do what it wants to do when I do those lines because it comes out a lot more natural and organic. And now I'm doing those same type of lines. This is with a really pretty copper marker. It's an American Crafts metallic copper marker. And that's another one that works really well over most surfaces and most mediums. I have yet to find one in black or white, but I would really like to because they work super well over mixed media surfaces. And now I'm going back in with that aqua. I think it's aqua. It's like an aqua color paint that I used in the last one, and I am just going to add little accenting marks to those seaweed green dashes that I did. And I love those two colors together. That seaweed green and that little aqua bluish color works so well together. So this is where I start to tone down the blue a little bit more. I am using an off-white, I think it's called Cream. Cream? Antique white? I don't know. It's like an off-white. and I'm taking a dry brush with, it's actually an oil brush, so it has really rough bristles, and I'm just dry brushing that color over that bright blue to tone it down a little bit more and blend it into the background. And when I'm doing this, I am also smudging the mists that I did, if you're wondering, but that's okay. You can't even tell, honestly. And I really like the way that turned out, actually, now that I'm looking at it again. I go back and forth. I'm like, why did I tone it down? And now I'm looking at it again, and it looks really good. So I'm just drying all of that. And I love that I started with the same project starter, but in the end you'll see how different the two projects look. They come out completely different. So you can print this so many times and use it a million different ways. Like, the possibilities are endless. Now I'm adding more of that gold paint, even though on the last one I had decided I didn't really care for that gold paint because it wasn't opaque enough. But here I am using it again. It gives just a really subtle shimmer to the page. And I think that's why I continue to use it. Then I get the bright gold from the Heidi Swapp color shine if I'm craving that bright gold color. Which I'm pretty sure, oh no, I'm using, ooh, this is exciting. So I'm using a black Heidi Swapp color shine. And I shook it and I went to open it so that I could do my typical splattering, but I actually couldn't get it open. So I decided to just spray it into one of my little palette pan things and then take a really tiny paintbrush and splatter it that way. And the splatters were so much smaller and I really liked the way it turned out. So I'll probably do that on purpose sometimes to get a different effect than using the little straw wand thing that comes in the bottle. So then I had a ton left over because of course I sprayed too much, and I got the idea to do my border in it. So I just used that same tiny paintbrush, and I'm almost using the color shine as a paint, or yeah, as an ink basically. And because this color shine dries a little bit lighter than a true black, it blends into the background a little and it looks really cool. So that was a happy accident. And then of course I didn't want to waste it. I still had a ton left over, so I got my extras journal and I just flung it on there. And then I set it to this, I move it around a little so it gets all runny, and then I just set it to the side to dry. And that'll be there for a different project another day. Then I'm going to look through Pinterest because I know I want to add a quote to this, a really simple quote, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to add. So I took to Pinterest to find a quote. And I think that's what I'm doing right now, actually. I end up coming, there I am. So I'm on Pinterest and I'm looking for something. And then of course, with my camera problems, my camera dies yet again. So I was just on a roll with the camera today. But again, you don't miss much. I'll show you what you miss. You'll actually see it. So I pick up the pen and then I'm like, oh, I should dry it a little so my hand doesn't smudge the paint. And I start to dry and then it dies. And I didn't realize it, but I did part of the quote down there. But I just used that same copper marker, and then I realized, so I charged the camera before I did anything else, and then I came back on. So the only thing you missed was that first line of the quote, and then I'm adding the second line, and then I'm just going to add um, some white accents to finish it up. So I'm just using that Uniball Signo? Is it even Uniball? I think it's Uniball, and I think it's Signa pen. And I'm just adding some white accents along that quote. If you use this project starter in any way, I would love to see it. Be sure to share it on Instagram using the hashtag #TheCreativesClub and tag the Creatives Club and or Nudoso so that I can see and repost. Here's an up close look. If you liked this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and to subscribe for more crafty videos to come. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye!